The greatest battles are not fought on blood-stained fields or in the chambers of power, but in the silent territories of trust, where the currency is vulnerability and the weapon of choice is betrayal. Understanding this fundamental truth separates those who navigate life with clear vision from those who stumble blindly through a landscape of illusions. Wondering why their wounds come from hands they once held in friendship. There exists a peculiar paradox in human existence. We are simultaneously our own greatest enemy and our most powerful ally. The external threats we face, the false friends who smile while sharpening their knives, the opportunists who orbit our success like vultures, the betrayers who trade our confidences for their advancement. These are merely reflections of the weaknesses we harbor within ourselves. A fortress with crumbling walls invites invasion. A man with unexamined vulnerabilities extends an open invitation to exploitation. The wisdom attributed to Machiavelli, often misunderstood and deliberately misrepresented, contains a brutal honesty that comfort-seeking minds reject, but pragmatic souls embrace. It is not a philosophy of evil, but a manual of reality, stripped of the pleasant fictions that lull the naive into complacency. In The Prince, Machiavelli observed that men are generally ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous. This was not cynicism but observation, the kind of clear-eyed assessment that allows one to navigate treacherous waters rather than drowning in them while clutching idealistic beliefs about human nature. The false friend operates in shadow territory, occupying the space between genuine companionship and outright enmity. They are more dangerous than open adversaries because they breach the walls we construct not through force but through the Trojan horse of feigned affection. They study us in the intimate moments we believe we are safe, cataloguing our fears, our ambitions, our secrets, and our weaknesses. This intelligence gathering is not conducted with malicious rubbing of hands in dimly lit rooms, but through the ordinary mechanisms of friendship, conversations, shared experiences, moments of vulnerability that feel like connection but function as reconnaissance. The anatomy of false friendship reveals itself through patterns that become visible only to those who train themselves to see. These patterns exist in the space between words and actions, in the gap between what someone claims to value and what their behavior actually demonstrates. A true friend celebrates your victories without the bitter aftertaste of envy. A false friend offers congratulations that arrive wrapped in subtle diminishment, in the carefully placed reminder of your previous failures, in the comparison that positions their achievements against yours, as if friendship were a competitive sport rather than mutual elevation. Consider the nature of envy, that most corrosive of human emotions, which eats at the soul like acid and transforms what could be admiration into resentment. The false friend often begins as a genuine friend, but the transition occurs in the moment when your success or happiness triggers something primitive in their psychology. They cannot simply feel joy for your good fortune. Instead, your gain becomes their loss. Your happiness becomes their suffering. This zero-sum perception of reality is the breeding ground for betrayal. The false friend reveals themselves through their relationship with your struggles and your triumphs. When you face difficulties, they appear not with genuine support but with a peculiar satisfaction, an almost imperceptible brightening that comes from witnessing another's descent. Their offers of help come laced with conditions, with reminders of the favor being extended, with subtle assertions of superiority. When you succeed, their absence speaks volumes. Suddenly they are busy, distracted, dealing with their own matters. The enthusiasm they showed when you were planning your endeavor evaporates when that endeavor bears fruit. But here is where Machiavellian wisdom intersects with self-knowledge. The false friend can only harm you to the extent that you permit them access to your vulnerabilities. They are parasites that require a host, and they can only attach where there is weakness to exploit. The man who has not examined his own psychology, who has not confronted his need for validation, who has not disciplined his tongue and guarded his secrets, who has not developed the internal strength to stand independent of others' opinions. This man is defenseless against betrayal because he has already betrayed himself through negligence. The process of destroying the weak self is not a single dramatic act but a daily practice of honest self-examination. It begins with the uncomfortable work of identifying the parts of yourself that compromise your sovereignty. These are the aspects of your character that place you at the mercy of external forces, the desperate need for approval that makes you moldable to others' desires, the fear of solitude that keeps you in toxic relationships, the unexamined beliefs about yourself that others can manipulate, the habits and addictions that create predictable patterns of weakness. Every man carries within him a weak self and a strong self, and the internal dialogue between these two determines the trajectory of his life. The weak self speaks in the voice of fear disguised as caution, of comfort disguised as contentment, of conformity disguised as social intelligence. It tells you to avoid difficult conversations, to overlook betrayals because addressing them would be uncomfortable, to diminish your ambitions to avoid disappointing those who never believed in you anyway. The weak self is not evil. It is simply the accumulation of all the compromises you have made, all the times you chose ease over growth, all the moments you prioritized others' comfort over your own truth. The strong self, by contrast, speaks with the clarity that comes from self-knowledge and the confidence that emerges from tested capability. It does not shout or boast, it states facts. It recognizes reality without the distorting lens of wishful thinking. It understands that the world operates according to principles that do not bend to accommodate your feelings about them. It knows that trust must be earned through demonstrated reliability, not freely given because you wish to believe in human goodness. It accepts that some people will dislike you regardless of your actions, that some friends will become enemies when circumstances change, that loyalty is rare and must be treasured when found but never assumed to be universal. The destruction of the weak self requires brutal honesty about your own role in the betrayals you have experienced. This is not self-blame, but self-examination. Did you ignore warning signs because acknowledging them would require action you were afraid to take? Did you share confidences with people who had not proven themselves worthy of such trust? Did you continue relationships past the point where the other person showed you who they really were? Did you allow violations of your boundaries because you feared confrontation or abandonment? There is a pattern that emerges when one studies the lives of those who repeatedly suffer betrayal. They are often generous with the wrong things to the wrong people at the wrong times. They give trust where respect should be earned first. They share their deepest vulnerabilities with acquaintances who have shown no capacity to protect such information. They confuse loneliness with connection and accept crumbs of attention while calling it friendship. They ignore the evidence of their senses, the feeling in their gut that something is wrong, the pattern of small betrayals that predict larger ones, the inconsistencies between someone's words and actions, because their need for companionship overwhelms their judgment. Machiavelli understood that men must learn to be both the fox and the lion, the fox to recognize traps and the lion to frighten wolves. Most people develop only one of these capacities, if either. They are foxes who see danger everywhere and trust no one, living in paranoid isolation, or they are lions who charge forward with brute honesty and wonder why they are constantly wounded by those who operate with more subtlety. The complete man integrates both aspects, the discernment to recognize false friends and the strength to act on that recognition without hesitation or regret. The recognition of false friends begins with pattern recognition rather than isolated incidents. A single moment of envy, a lone instance of unavailability, an occasional sharp comment, these do not define betrayal. But patterns, when observed with clear eyes, tell stories that individual incidents obscure. The friend who is always available when they need something but perpetually busy when you reach out. The confidant who somehow manages to share your private information with others while claiming it was accidental. The supporter who undermines your confidence with subtle criticisms disguised as concern. The companion who encourages your vices while discouraging your growth. These patterns become visible only when you create the internal space for observation. When you step back from the emotional investment in the relationship and examine it with the detachment of an outside observer. This requires a particular kind of courage because it means being willing to see what is actually there rather than what you wish were there. It means accepting that someone you have invested time, energy, and trust in may not be who you believe them to be. It means facing the loneliness that comes with removing false friends from your circle before you have genuine friends to replace them with. The weak self resists this process because it would rather endure betrayal than face solitude. It convinces you that a false friend is better than no friend, that you should lower your standards because no one is perfect, that you are being judgmental or paranoid or too sensitive. The weak self has 1,000 rationalizations for why you should accept less than you deserve, and it delivers them in your own voice, making them seem like your own thoughts rather than the echo of past conditioning. Part 2. The Crucible of Self-Transformation. The destruction of the weak self is not a metaphorical exercise, but a practical necessity for anyone who wishes to live free from the control of others. This destruction is simultaneously an act of violence and an act of love. Violence against the comfortable patterns that keep you small, love for the potential that lies dormant within you. It is the difference between the life you have been living and the life you are capable of living, between reacting to circumstances and creating them, between being a character in someone else's story and being the author of your own. This transformation begins in solitude. Not the solitude of loneliness, which is the empty space left by the absence of connection, but the solitude of self-communion, which is the full space of undistracted self-examination. The modern world conspires against this kind of solitude through constant connectivity, endless entertainment, and the cultural message that being alone is a problem to be solved rather than a condition to be embraced. The weak self fears solitude because in silence, without the distraction of others, it must confront itself. The strong self seeks solitude because it is in that silence that clarity emerges. In solitude, you begin the inventory of your weaknesses not as an exercise in self-flagellation, but as a practical assessment of vulnerabilities that others can exploit. This inventory must be ruthlessly honest. What do you need from others that compromises your independence? Perhaps it is validation of your worth, so you perform for approval and reshape yourself to match others' expectations. Perhaps it is emotional support, so you tolerate poor treatment rather than risk standing alone. Perhaps it is a sense of belonging, so you conform to groups even when their values contradict your own. Perhaps it is financial security, so you endure disrespect in professional relationships. Perhaps it is romantic affection, so you accept betrayal in intimate partnerships. Each of these needs is a leash by which others can control you. The false friend intuitively understands your needs and uses them as leverage. They offer you what you crave: validation, support, belonging, opportunity, affection, but always with conditions, always with strings attached, always in a way that increases your dependence rather than your strength. They become the source of something you believe you cannot generate for yourself. And in that dynamic, they gain power while you lose sovereignty. The destruction of the weak self, therefore, requires the development of internal sources for what you currently seek externally. This is not about becoming cold or disconnected, but about building a foundation that does not require others to maintain it. It means developing self-validation so that while you may appreciate others' recognition, you do not require it for your sense of worth. It means building emotional resilience so that while you value support, you can endure difficulties without it. It means cultivating self-sufficiency so that while you enjoy cooperation, you are not hostage to others' decisions. This process is uncomfortable because it requires you to face experiences and emotions you have been avoiding. The weak self has developed elaborate defense mechanisms to protect you from pain, but these same mechanisms keep you trapped. You avoid difficult conversations, so problems fester. You suppress anger at violations of your boundaries, so people learn they can disrespect you without consequence. You deny evidence that someone is untrustworthy because acknowledging it would require action. You maintain relationships that no longer serve you because ending them feels cruel, or because you fear judgment, or because change is frightening. The strong self understands that short-term discomfort is the price of long-term freedom. It is willing to have the difficult conversation, to set the boundary, to end the toxic relationship, to face the fear, to sit with the anger, and learn from it rather than suppress it. It recognizes that every time you avoid discomfort, you strengthen the weak self and make it more difficult to change. Every time you face discomfort deliberately, you strengthen the strong self and expand your capacity for action. Consider the practice of deliberate exposure to the things you fear. If you fear confrontation, the weak self will help you rationalize avoiding it, will tell you that keeping the peace is wisdom rather than cowardice. The strong self understands that the fear of confrontation is itself a weakness that others exploit, and it deliberately seeks opportunities to practice confrontation until the fear diminishes. This does not mean becoming aggressive or seeking conflict, but it means being willing to assert your truth even when it creates tension, being willing to say no even when it disappoints someone, being willing to call out betrayal even when it makes you uncomfortable. If you fear solitude, the weak self will keep you in any relationship rather than risk being alone, will accept breadcrumbs of attention and call it love, will tolerate disrespect because at least it means you are not lonely. The strong self deliberately cultivates comfort with solitude, spending time alone not as punishment but as practice, learning to enjoy your own company, developing interests and pursuits that do not require others' participation, building a life that is enriched by relationships but not dependent on them. If you fear failure, the weak self will prevent you from attempting anything where success is not guaranteed, will keep you in situations that are comfortable but unfulfilling, will help you rationalize settling for less than your potential. The strong self understands that failure is information, not identity, and deliberately takes on challenges where failure is possible, learning from each attempt, building competence through iteration. developing the confidence that comes not from never failing, but from failing and continuing anyway. The destruction of the weak self requires the examination and often the abandonment of beliefs that have shaped your behavior but do not serve your growth. These beliefs often sound reasonable, even virtuous, which is why they persist. I should always be nice to people. I should not judge others. I should give people the benefit of the doubt. I should forgive and forget. I should put others' needs before my own. I should not be selfish. These beliefs, while appearing noble, often function as permissions for others to exploit you. The person who believes they should always be nice struggles to assert boundaries because doing so feels mean. The person who believes they should not judge others allows themselves to be harmed repeatedly because recognizing patterns of bad behavior and acting on that recognition constitutes judgment. The person who believes they should always give the benefit of the doubt becomes an easy mark for manipulators who understand that their victims will explain away clear evidence of betrayal. The person who believes they should forgive and forget creates a consequence-free environment for those who betray them. The person who believes they should put others first teaches people that their needs do not matter. The strong self replaces these beliefs with principles that honor both personal boundaries and genuine compassion. I will be kind when kindness is appropriate and firm when firmness is required. I will observe people's behavior and draw reasonable conclusions while remaining open to evidence that my conclusions were wrong. I will give people opportunities to demonstrate their character, but I will not ignore what they demonstrate. I will forgive those who show genuine remorse and changed behavior, and I will remember those who do not so I can protect myself accordingly. I will attend to others' needs in ways that do not compromise my own well-being. I will prioritize my growth and health so that I can show up as my best self in service to others. The process of replacing the weak self with the strong self is not instantaneous. It happens through repeated choices that contradict old patterns. The first time you set a boundary with someone who is used to you having none, it will feel wrong. You will doubt yourself. You will wonder if you are being too harsh, too sensitive, too demanding. The weak self will scream in protest, will generate anxiety and guilt, will try to get you to apologize and retreat. This is the critical moment. If you maintain the boundary despite the discomfort, you teach yourself that you can endure that discomfort. You weaken the weak self's hold on you. If you apologize and retreat, you reinforce the pattern and make it harder to change next time. With each choice that prioritizes truth over comfort, boundaries over acceptance, self-respect over others' approval, you build evidence that contradicts the weak self's narrative. You discover that people respect you more when you respect yourself, that healthy relationships improve when you set boundaries while toxic relationships reveal themselves and fall away, that what you feared would happen, rejection, abandonment, conflict, either does not happen or is far less catastrophic than you imagined. You learn that you can handle the consequences of standing firm, that solitude is preferable to false connection, that disapproval from those who do not respect you is not actually painful once you stop seeking their approval. Machiavelli observed that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both, but that one must avoid being hated. This principle, often quoted out of context, contains profound wisdom about human relationships. The strong self does not seek to be feared in the sense of inspiring terror, but it does ensure that others understand there are consequences for betrayal, that boundaries will be enforced, that trust once broken is not easily restored. This is not cruelty, but clarity. It is the difference between being kind and being naive, between being forgiving and being a doormat, between being open-hearted and being foolish. The man who has destroyed his weak self does not fear betrayal because he has already survived the greatest betrayal, his own self-betrayal through years of compromising his truth, suppressing his needs, and accepting less than he deserved. Having faced that and changed it, external betrayals lose their power. They are disappointing, perhaps, but they are not devastating. They are information about who someone is, not verdicts on who you are. Part 3. The practice of protection and sovereignty. Having identified the patterns of false friendship and begun the work of internal transformation, one must develop practical skills for navigating the social world with both wisdom and strength. This is where Machiavellian principles become not merely philosophical abstractions, but tools for daily use. The goal is not to become paranoid or cynical, but to become discerning and strategic, to extend trust wisely rather than freely, to recognize games being played and choose whether to participate. The first principle is the strategic management of information. Every piece of information you share with someone is a potential weapon they can use against you. This does not mean living in secretive paranoia, but rather practicing thoughtful discretion. The weak self overshares because it seeks connection and mistakes vulnerability for intimacy. It confesses its fears, its failures, its secrets, its ambitions to people who have not earned that level of trust, who have not demonstrated through consistent action that they can be trusted with such information. The strong self understands that intimacy is built gradually, that trust is earned through demonstrated reliability over time, that there are layers to relationships and different levels of information appropriate for each layer. Acquaintances need not know your struggles. Casual friends need not know your deepest fears. Even close friends need not know every detail of your life. The most intimate information, your greatest vulnerabilities, your biggest ambitions, your private failures, should be shared only with those who have proven through years of consistent behavior that they will protect rather than exploit such information. False friends often attempt to accelerate intimacy through reciprocal vulnerability. They share something personal, which creates social pressure for you to reciprocate. They position themselves as kindred spirits who understand you in ways others do not. They create an illusion of deep connection quickly. The weak self hungry for such connection falls for this and overshares. The strong self observes this pattern and proceeds slowly, sharing information gradually while observing how the other person handles each piece, looking for evidence of discretion or indiscretion, consistency or manipulation. Pay attention to how people handle information you share. Does it stay private, or do you later discover they discussed it with others? When they recount your story, do they protect your privacy or use your vulnerability for entertainment? Do they weaponize information you shared during conflicts, throwing your confessed fears or failures in your face? These behaviors reveal character and predict future behavior. The person who gossips to you about others will gossip to others about you. The person who betrays someone else's confidence will betray yours. The person who uses vulnerability as ammunition is not a safe person to be vulnerable with. The second principle is the observation of action over words. False friends are often eloquent in their expressions of loyalty, support, and affection. They speak of friendship in grand terms, make promises freely, and declare their commitment enthusiastically. The weak self accepts these words at face value because it wants to believe in the friendship. The strong self observes whether actions align with words and gives weight only to demonstrated behavior. Watch what people do when they believe no one is watching, or when there is no benefit to them. Do they keep their word even when it becomes inconvenient? Do they show up when you need help even when it costs them time or effort? Do they defend you in your absence or remain silent when others criticize you? Do they celebrate your successes or only appear when you are useful to them? Do they respect your boundaries or constantly test them? Do they reciprocate the energy you invest in the relationship, or do you find yourself always initiating, always giving, always accommodating? The pattern of actions over time reveals infinitely more than the most passionate declarations of friendship. A person who says they care about you but consistently prioritizes their convenience over your needs does not care about you. A person who claims to support your dreams but subtly undermines your confidence does not support you. A person who professes loyalty but gossips about you to others is not loyal. Believe the behavior, not the words. The third principle is the creation of tests that reveal character. This is not about manipulation, but about creating natural situations that allow someone to show you who they are. The Machiavellian strategist understands that character is revealed under pressure, when comfort is disrupted, when there is something to be gained or lost. In comfortable circumstances, even false friends can appear genuine. It is in the crucible of challenge that true character emerges. These tests need not be elaborate. They can be as simple as saying no to a request and observing the response. Does the person accept your boundary with grace, or do they pressure, guilt, or manipulate you? Share a small confidence and observe whether it remains private. Succeed at something and observe whether they celebrate genuinely or react with envy. Face a difficulty and observe whether they show up with support or disappear until the crisis passes. Achieve something they were competing for and observe whether they congratulate you or withdraw. Ask them for a favor that costs them something and observe whether they help freely or extract a price. Pay attention to how people react when you set boundaries or prioritize your needs. The false friend will often frame your self-respect as selfishness, your boundaries as rejection, your growth as betrayal of the dynamic they preferred. They will attempt to make you feel guilty for changing, for growing, for no longer accepting what you once tolerated. They will accuse you of becoming arrogant or forgetting where you came from or thinking you are better than them. These accusations reveal their investment in keeping you in a subordinate position. The genuine friend, by contrast, celebrates your growth even when it changes the dynamic between you. They adjust to your new boundaries without resentment. They support your evolution even when it means less access to you. They recognize that healthy relationships must adapt as both people grow, and they are willing to do that adaptation work. If your growth triggers their resentment, that relationship was built on your limitation, and you are better off without it. The fourth principle is the maintenance of strategic distance even in friendship. The weak self believes that closeness means constant availability, complete transparency, and total merging of lives. It fears that maintaining any distance or privacy signals distrust or coldness. The strong self understands that healthy relationships require space, that maintaining distinct identities strengthens rather than weakens bonds, that some distance is protective and wise. Even with genuine friends, you need not share everything, be constantly available, or prioritize their needs above your own consistently. Healthy friendship is reciprocal, not sacrificial. It enhances both people's lives rather than requiring one person to diminish themselves for the other. If a friendship requires you to be smaller, less successful, less happy, less yourself, it is not friendship but exploitation. Strategic distance also means not making yourself dependent on any single relationship or small group of relationships. The person who has only one or two friends is vulnerable because the loss of those relationships would be catastrophic. The person who has a diverse network of connections across different areas of life has resilience. If one friend proves false, others remain. If one relationship ends, life continues rich with other connections. This principle applies particularly to professional relationships, where the intersection of personal connection and material interests creates complex dynamics. The weak self wants to believe that professional relationships are the same as friendships, that colleagues are friends, that shared work creates genuine bonds. Sometimes this is true, but often it is not, and the person who fails to recognize the difference becomes vulnerable to betrayal when interests diverge. In professional contexts, maintain cordiality and cooperation without confusing it for deep friendship. Share information relevant to work without sharing personal vulnerabilities. Collaborate effectively without making yourself dependent on any single relationship. Support others' success without expecting reciprocation. Recognize that when resources are limited or opportunities arise, most people will prioritize their advancement over your friendship. And this is not necessarily a moral failing, but a reality of human nature in competitive contexts. The fifth principle is the swift and decisive response to betrayal. The weak self, when confronted with betrayal, engages in elaborate rationalization. It minimizes the betrayal, questions its own perception, gives the betrayer multiple chances, and often ends up apologizing to the person who wronged it. This response teaches the betrayer that there are no consequences for betrayal and invites further exploitation. The strong self, when confronted with clear evidence of betrayal, acts swiftly and decisively. This does not necessarily mean dramatic confrontation or public exposure, though sometimes that is appropriate. More often it means the quiet removal of the betrayer from positions of trust, the withdrawal of access to information and opportunities, the downgrading of the relationship from friend to acquaintance or from acquaintance to stranger. It means ending the relationship entirely if the betrayal was severe or if the pattern is clear. This swift action serves multiple purposes. It protects you from further harm by removing the betrayer's access to hurt you. It preserves your dignity by demonstrating that you value yourself enough to enforce consequences for mistreatment. It sends a signal to others in your circle that betrayal is not tolerated, which deters potential future betrayers. And it frees your time, energy, and emotional resources for relationships that deserve them. The weak self fears this decisiveness because it cannot tolerate being perceived as harsh or unforgiving. It worries that others will judge it for ending relationships, that it will appear cold or cruel, that it is failing to live up to ideals of forgiveness and second chances.